The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council sparkled like a jewel, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 3 suns. But today, the usual peace was broken by voices raised in fear and anger. 50 different alien species sat around the massive circular table, all of them talking at once. At the center of the table, First Speaker Ray stood up. His blue skin looked pale under the lights as he raised all 4 of his hands for silence. Please, my fellow council members, we must remain calm. Nobody listened. A small green alien jumped on the table, his antenna twitching wildly. Calm. The mining outpost on Beta 7 was just destroyed. That's the 3rd one this month. The room got even louder. In all the chaos, only one person sat quietly, watching everything with careful eyes. Tom Miller, the human ambassador, looked very different from the others. Where they had extra limbs, bright colors, or unusual features, he looked plain in his simple black suit. He was also much heavier and more solidly built than the others, having grown up on Earth, a planet the council called a Deathworld. Tom cleared his throat. The sound wasn't very loud, but something about it made several nearby aliens jump in their seats. They weren't used to the deep sounds humans made. If I may speak, Tom asked politely. First Speaker Ray nodded quickly, probably happy for any break in the chaos. The council recognizes Ambassador Miller of Earth. Tom stood up slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves. Even after 6 months on the council, many members were still nervous around him. They couldn't help it. Their bodies naturally feared anything from a high-gravity world like Earth. The reports show these crystal creatures are immune to energy weapons, Tom said. They absorb the energy and grow stronger. But has anyone tried physical solutions? Physical solutions? Asked a tall, thin alien with purple skin. You mean touching them? He sounded horrified at the idea. Tom nodded. Sometimes the old ways work best. On Earth, we've been dealing with difficult mining problems for hundreds of years. We might have some ideas that could help. Absolutely not. The purple alien skin turned slightly blue with emotion. We accepted Earth into the council because your people showed basic space travel ability. But this is far too serious to trust to primitives. Tom didn't get angry. He was used to this. Instead, he pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A hologram appeared over the table, showing the crystal swarm attacking the last mining outpost. Look carefully, he said. See how they move. They're following some kind of pattern. This isn't just random destruction. The council members watched silently. Even the most anti-human among them had to admit he had a point. These things act like a mining operation gone wrong, Tom continued. And when it comes to mining, Earth has more experience than most council worlds. We've been doing it the hard way for centuries. The hard way? First Speaker Ray asked. Physical mining, drills, explosives. Things that might seem primitive to you, but we understand them deeply. And more importantly, we understand what to do when they go wrong. A new alarm suddenly rang through the hall. Everyone's communication devices lit up at once. First Speaker Ray's voice shook as he read the message. The crystal swarm, it's headed toward the platinum sector. If they destroy those mines, half the council's worlds will lose their main power source. The room erupted in panic again. Aliens were running around, shouting, some even crying. Tom waited patiently until First Speaker Ray looked at him. How long would it take you to bring in some human mining experts? Ray asked quietly. I know just the person, Tom replied. He's not what you'd call diplomatic, but he's the best there is at handling mining disasters. His name is Jack Stone. A human name that means rock. One of the other council members asked nervously. Tom smiled slightly. Trust me, that's not even the most interesting thing about him. First Speaker Ray looked around the room at his panicking council, then back at the hologram showing the approaching swarm. Finally, he nodded. Make the call, Ambassador. It seems we're out of options. Tom pulled out his communication device, already knowing this decision would change the council forever. Sometimes you needed a Deathworlder to solve a problem. And Jack Stone was the most Deathworlder human he knew. Jack Stone walked through the council space station like he owned it. His heavy boots made loud sounds on the shiny floor, and his worn leather jacket looked strange next to the fancy outfits of the aliens around him. He carried a large metal case in one hand like it weighed nothing, even though it would have taken 3 normal aliens to lift it. The aliens moved out of his way quickly. Some of them even pressed themselves against the walls when he passed. They could sense something different about him, something dangerous. Humans were known to be strong because they came from Earth. But Jack Stone was strong even for a human. You must be the mining expert, First Speaker Ray said when Jack entered the meeting room. The blue-skinned alien tried to hide his nervousness, but his hands were shaking slightly. Jack put his case down with a heavy thud that made everyone jump. That's right. Nice place you got here. He looked around at the crystal walls. Though you might want to think about using something stronger than crystal, considering your current problem. Ambassador Tom, who was standing nearby, tried not to smile. This was exactly why he'd called Jack. The man didn't waste time trying to be polite. Please tell us your initial thoughts, First Speaker Ray said, pointing to the hologram showing the crystal swarm. Jack walked right through the hologram, making several council members gasp. He pulled a small device from his pocket, not the smooth, shiny technology the aliens used, but something that looked rough and homemade. These readings are interesting, he said, holding up his device. Your crystal friends are giving off some familiar patterns. Reminds me of the echo caves back on Earth. The what? Asked a purple-skinned alien. Big cave system under the Pacific Ocean. The crystals there grow in patterns based on sound waves. Jack tapped his device. These space crystals are doing something similar, just bigger and meaner. He opened his case and pulled out what looked like a piece of rock. Several aliens backed away quickly. Relax, Jack said with a grin. It's just a sample from those caves. Watch this. He pulled out another device and pressed a button. A high-pitched sound filled the room. The rock in his hand started to vibrate. Then slowly it began to crack. Fascinating. A small green alien moved closer, his fear forgotten. You destroyed it with sound. Not destroyed, controlled. Jack picked up the pieces. These crystals, they grow and move based on certain frequencies. Understanding those frequencies means you can control them, maybe even stop them. First Speaker Ray leaned forward. You believe you can stop the swarm this way. Stop them, maybe. But first we need to understand them better. Jack pulled up more images on his device. See these patterns? They're not random. This is an old mining pattern, just like we used to use, but way more advanced. Someone built these things to mine asteroids, I bet. They just lost control of them. The council members looked at each other. The idea that these destructive creatures were actually mining tools hadn't occurred to them. How can you be sure? Ambassador Tom asked. Jack pointed to different parts of the hologram. Look at how they cut into the asteroids. Perfect angles, specific depths. They're following old programming, but something's gone wrong. They're not just mining anymore. They're reproducing, using the minerals they mine to make more of themselves. Can you stop them? First Speaker Ray asked again. Jack smiled and several aliens shivered. It wasn't a mean smile, but it had too many teeth for their comfort. "I've got some ideas, but you're not going to like them. We'll need explosives. Lots of them." The room erupted in protests. Aliens were shouting about safety and regulations. Jack waited for them to quiet down. "Look," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You called me because your fancy energy weapons don't work. Sometimes you need to fight crystals with good old-fashioned brute force. That's what we humans do best." He pulled more equipment from his case. "Now, who wants to learn about controlled demolitions in space?" The aliens looked terrified, but they also looked interested. After all, what choice did they have? The crystal swarm was getting closer to the platinum sector every minute. And watching Jack Stone confidently set up his equipment, even Ambassador Tom had to admit, maybe the Council needed a little human brute force right now. In the Council's main testing chamber, Jack Stone stood before a small group of frightened aliens. Behind him, a large screen showed different types of explosives and mining tools. None of the aliens had ever seen such primitive devices before. "All right," Jack said, holding up what looked like a metal cylinder. "This is a sonic resonance charge. Think of it like a tuning fork, but one that can shake crystals apart at just the right frequency." A small red alien raised one of its 6 hands. But won't explosions in space be dangerous?" Jack laughed, which made several aliens jump. "Everything in space is dangerous. That's why we're going to be careful. Watch this." He placed the cylinder inside a clear testing box. Inside the box was a crystal similar to the ones in the swarm. Jack pressed a button on his remote control, and the cylinder started to hum. The crystal in the box began to vibrate. Then instead of exploding, it simply fell apart into neat pieces. "See," Jack said, "no explosion, just controlled destruction. The trick isn't to blow them up, it's to make them break themselves apart." First Speaker Ray moved closer, fascinated despite his fear. "And you believe this will work on the entire swarm?" "Not exactly." Jack pulled up a new image on the screen. It showed a massive space station. "We need something bigger. I'm calling it the Resonance Hub. Think of it like a giant speaker system in space." He pointed to different parts of the design. Even though the aliens didn't understand all of it, they could tell it was clever. The design used their advanced technology combined with human mining techniques in ways they'd never considered. "The hard part," Jack continued, "is that we need a team to build and operate it. And they need to be human." "Why human?" asked Ambassador Tom, though he already knew the answer. "Because this thing needs to be built in high-pressure, high-radiation areas. Places that would kill most aliens." Jack looked around the room. "No offense, but humans are built tougher. We can handle it." The aliens murmured among themselves. They didn't like admitting that humans were better at anything, but they couldn't argue with the facts. "How many humans do you need?" First Speaker Ray asked. "I've got a team ready. 5 of the best mining specialists from Earth. They're crazy enough to try this and skilled enough to pull it off." Jack grinned. "They're already on their way." He pressed another button, and the screen showed 5 human faces. The aliens gasped. Each human looked as tough and scary as Jack. "Meet the team," Jack said. "Bill's our explosives expert. Mary handles deep space construction. Pete knows more about crystals than anyone alive. Mike can build anything that moves, and Rob's the best space welder in the solar system." They all look. First Speaker Ray paused, searching for a polite word. "Dangerous," Jack suggested. "Good, because what we're about to do is dangerous. But it's less dangerous than letting that swarm reach your platinum sector." He pulled up one final image, a simulation of his plan. The Resonance Hub floated in space, sending out waves that made the crystal swarm break apart harmlessly. The hub will create a field of sonic waves, Jack explained, like a net made of sound. When the crystals hit it, they'll break down into pieces small enough to collect and study. No explosion, no destruction, just controlled demolition on a massive scale. The aliens watched the simulation run again and again. It was elegant in its own way, combining their advanced technology with simple human knowledge. "How soon can you start?" First speaker Ray asked. Jack checked his watch. "My team lands in 2 hours. We can begin construction immediately." He looked around the room. "I know this isn't how you usually do things. It's not clean, it's not pretty, and it's definitely not safe. But sometimes the best solutions aren't pretty. Sometimes you need to get your hands dirty." The aliens looked at each other. Their fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, hope. "Very well," first speaker Ray said. "You have the Council's permission to proceed. Just try not to break anything else while you're saving us." Jack picked up his tools with a smile. "No promises about that. Breaking things is what we humans do best. We just learn to break them in useful ways." The test site was an abandoned mining sector, far from any important space lanes. 6 human ships floated in the darkness, looking tiny against the backdrop of space. Inside the main ship, Jack and his team made final checks on their equipment. "Crystal swarm approaching," Mary's voice came through the radio. "Sensors show they're hungry. They've already eaten 3 asteroids on their way here." Jack watched through the main window as the swarm appeared. It looked like a cloud of shining diamonds, beautiful but deadly. Each crystal was the size of a small car, and there were thousands of them. "Remember," Jack said to his team, "this is just a test. We hit them with a small resonance charge, see how they react, then get out fast." Bill's laugh crackled over the radio. "Since when do you play it safe, Jack?" "Since we've got an audience." Jack glanced at the Council observation ship, safely hidden behind a moon. He knew they were watching every move. "All right, Pete," Jack called. "You're up first. Give us a reading on these things." Pete's ship moved forward slowly. It was carrying special sensors he had built just for this mission. "Getting some weird readings, boss. These crystals, they're smarter than we thought. They're communicating with each other." "How?" Rob asked, his welding torch forgotten in his hand. "Through vibrations, like they're singing to each other." Pete's voice sounded worried. "And they just noticed us." The swarm changed direction suddenly, moving toward the human ships. The crystal surfaces began to glow with a hungry red light. "Mike now," Jack ordered. Mike's ship shot forward, releasing the first resonance charge. It floated toward the swarm, humming softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the nearest crystals began to shake. Cracks appeared in their surfaces. Several of them split apart, breaking into harmless pieces. "It's working," Mary shouted. But their celebration was too early. The remaining crystals moved faster, surrounding Mike's ship. "They're adapting," Pete warned. "The frequency isn't affecting them anymore." "Mike, get out of there," Jack ordered. Mike's engines roared as he tried to escape, but the crystals were too close. They started attaching themselves to his ship's hull. "Hull temperature rising," Mike reported calmly, even though he was in danger. "These things are trying to eat my ship." "Not today, they're not." Jack fired his engines. His ship shot forward, straight toward the swarm. The aliens watching from their safe distance gasped. Even Ambassador Tom held his breath. What they saw next amazed them all. Jack's ship released a series of smaller charges, each one tuned to a different frequency. The charges created a web of sonic waves around Mike's ship. The crystals attacking it began to vibrate, then crack, then break apart. "No, that's what I call mining," Bill cheered. But they weren't done yet. The rest of the swarm was coming, and it looked angry, if crystals could look angry. "New plan," Jack announced. "Everyone, form up. Remember those mining formations we used in the Echo Caves? Let's show these crystals some old Earth techniques." The 5 human ships moved into position around Jack's, forming a 6-pointed star. Each ship released resonance charges in a specific pattern. "Just like breaking up a crystal vein," Mary said, remembering their training. The charges created overlapping waves of sound. Where they crossed, the crystals couldn't resist. Pieces of broken crystal filled space like glittering snow. In the council ship, First Speaker Ray watched in amazement. "They're actually doing it," he whispered. "They're breaking the swarm apart." "That's why we called them," Ambassador Tom said proudly. "Humans don't just solve problems. We break them into smaller problems we can handle." Finally, the remaining crystals retreated. The test site was filled with floating crystal fragments, harmless now. "Well," Jack said, checking his instruments, "good news and bad news. Good news is, we know the resonance charges work. Bad news," he paused, looking at his readings. "These crystals learn fast. Next time we face them, we'll need something bigger." In the silence that followed, everyone knew this had only been the first round. The real battle was still to come. But they had proved something important. Sometimes the universe's biggest problems needed humanity's primitive solutions. Back at the council station, alarms were ringing everywhere. The main screen showed something that made every alien's blood run cold. The crystal swarm had doubled in size. "They're not just adapting," Pete explained, pointing to his readings. "They're evolving, using the minerals they eat to make themselves stronger." Jack stood at the front of the emergency meeting, looking more serious than usual. The pieces of broken crystal from their test fight sat on the table in front of him. "Our sonic charges won't work anymore," he said. "These crystals learn fast, but that's okay, because humans learn faster." He pulled out an old, worn book from his jacket. Several aliens leaned forward, curious. They'd never seen a paper book before. "This is my great-grandfather's mining journal," Jack said. "He worked in the deepest mines on Earth, back before we had fancy technology. And he wrote about something interesting." He opened the book to a marked page. "Sometimes the old ways work best." "What do you mean?" First Speaker Ray asked. Jack smiled. "Before we had sonic drills and laser cutters, we had something simpler. Something these crystals won't expect." He pulled out a rough piece of metal. "Diamond-tip drills. Because sometimes to break a crystal, you need another crystal." Mary stepped forward, carrying a large case. Inside were tools that looked ancient to the aliens, drills, picks, and hammers, all modified with modern technology. "We're going old school," she explained. "These tools are made with diamonds and other hard crystals from Earth. The crystals in the swarm won't know how to defend against them because they've never seen anything like them." "But that's so primitive," a purple alien protested. "Exactly," Jack said. "That's why it'll work. Sometimes you need to go backwards to move forwards." Mike and Rob wheeled in something large covered with a sheet. When they pulled the sheet off, the aliens gasped. It looked like a massive drilling machine, but covered in crystal spikes. "Meet the crystal cracker," Rob said proudly. Old Earth mining tech combined with pieces of their own broken crystals. It's like fighting fire with fire. Or in this case, crystal with crystal, Bill added with a grin. Pete's sensors suddenly beeped loudly. Everyone turned to look at the main screen. The crystal swarm was moving faster now, heading straight for the platinum sector. "They're not just bigger," Pete said, checking his readings. "They're smarter. Look at how they move. They're protecting their center, like they have a queen or something. Jack's eyes lit up. A queen. Pete, you're a genius. He turned to the council members. Every mining operation needs a control center. These crystals aren't just random. They're being controlled from somewhere in the middle of that swarm. So if we can reach the center, Ambassador Tom started. We can shut down the whole operation, Jack finished. But it won't be easy. The center will be the most heavily protected part. He walked over to the crystal cracker and patted its side. That's why we built this beauty. It's not just a drill, it's a Trojan horse. The outer layer is made from their own broken crystals. They'll think it's one of them until it's too late. First Speaker Ray looked worried. This plan, it's very dangerous. You'll have to get very close to the swarm. Of course it's dangerous, Jack said. But sometimes you have to get close to something to break it. That's what we humans do. We get our hands dirty. He looked at his team. They all nodded, ready for whatever came next. The crystal cracker can only hold 2 people, Jack continued. I'll pilot it. I need one more volunteer. I'll go, Mary said immediately. I've got the most experience with the drill controls. The council chamber was quiet. The aliens watched these strange, brave humans planning what seemed like an impossible mission. When do we start? First Speaker Ray asked quietly. Jack checked the screen showing the swarm's movement. They'll reach the first platinum sector mine in 6 hours. So we start now. He turned to his team. Let's show these crystals what happens when they mess with humans. The plan was crazy, dangerous, and probably impossible. But as the humans rushed to prepare, the aliens realized something important. Sometimes crazy and impossible was exactly what you needed. The platinum sector glowed with the light of 1,000 mining operations. Or at least it used to. Now, one by one, the lights were going out as the crystal swarm approached. Inside the crystal cracker, Jack and Mary made final checks on their equipment. The machine looked like a giant crystal itself now, covered in fragments from their previous battle. Remember, Pete's voice crackled through their radio. You'll only have one shot at this. Once they realize you're not one of them, they'll try to eat us. We know, Jack finished. He looked at Mary. Ready. She nodded, her hands steady on the controls. Born ready. The crystal cracker moved forward, its engines hidden behind layers of crystalline camouflage. Around them, the other human ships took position, ready to create a distraction if needed. Swarm approaching, Bill reported. And it's bigger than ever. Through their view screen, they watched the crystal swarm appear. It was beautiful and terrifying, like a mountain of diamonds moving through space. The individual crystals had grown larger, some now bigger than ships. Look at the pattern, Mary whispered. They're definitely protecting something in the center. Jack nodded, just like an earth beehive protects its queen. He switched on their special sensors. Pete, are you getting these readings? Crystal clear, Pete replied, then laughed at his own joke. The centerpiece, it's huge. Must be the original mining control unit that went wrong. The crystal cracker drifted closer to the swarm. For a tense minute, nothing happened. The crystals moved around them, accepting them as one of their own. It's working, Mary said quietly. Then everything went wrong. A large crystal bumped against their ship. There was a moment of silence, then a high-pitched sound that made their teeth hurt. They know. Jack shouted, Plan B. Mary's hands flew over the controls. The crystal covering on their ship broke away, revealing the drilling machine underneath. At the same time, the other human ships moved in, firing sonic charges to create confusion. Going for the center, Jack announced. The crystal cracker's main drill started spinning, its diamond tip gleaming. the swarm went crazy. Crystals smashed against their ship from all sides. The hull creaked under the pressure. Hull integrity at 60%, Mary reported calmly, though her knuckles were white on the controls. "Pete, we need a path," Jack called. On it, Pete's ship moved closer, releasing a new type of sonic charge. It created a tunnel through the swarm, but it was closing fast. "Now or never," Jack said. He pushed the engines to full power. The crystal cracker shot forward through the tunnel of broken crystals. Behind them, Bill and Rob's ships fired continuously, keeping the swarm distracted. "There it is." Mary pointed at their screen. In the center of the swarm floated a crystal unlike any other. It was huge, the size of a small moon, and it pulsed with a red light. "The Queen," Jack said. "Or should I say, the main control unit." He looked at their readings. "It's ancient. Must be from some long-dead civilization's mining operation." "Hull at 40%, Mary warned. "We need to do this fast." Jack grabbed the main controls. Time to show them some good old-fashioned earth mining techniques. The crystal cracker's drill hit the giant crystal's surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the drill began to sink in. "It's working," Mary shouted. Around them, the swarm went wild. Crystals slammed into their ship from every direction. Warning lights flashed everywhere. "Hull at 20%, Mary reported. 15%, 10%. Almost there, Jack gritted his teeth. The drill was nearly to the center. Suddenly, the giant crystal began to glow brighter. A high-pitched sound filled their ship. "It's going to explode," Mary warned. "Good," Jack smiled, "because that's exactly what we planned for." He hit a button, and special charges they'd hidden in the drill began to detonate. The sound of cracking crystal filled space. The giant control crystal split apart from the inside, its pieces floating away harmlessly. Around it, the swarm seemed to freeze. "Hull at 5%, Mary said. Please tell me it worked." They watched as, one by one, the crystals in the swarm stopped moving. Without their control unit, they were just floating rocks again. In the council observation ship, First Speaker Ray watched in amazement. "They did it," he whispered. They actually did it. But the celebration would have to wait, because inside the crystal cracker, Jack and Mary had one more problem. Their ship was falling apart, and they were trapped in the middle of a field of broken crystals. Warning lights flashed inside the dying crystal cracker. Jack and Mary sat in their failing ship, surrounded by pieces of broken crystal that floated like stars around them. "Well," Jack said with a small smile, "good news is we saved the galaxy. Bad news is we might not be around to collect the thank you cards," Mary added, trying to get any system to respond. Nothing worked. Through their cracked view screen, they could see their victory. The massive swarm was now just a field of dead crystals. The threat was over, but they were trapped. "Hull breach in 2 minutes," the computer warned them. "The others can't reach us in time," Mary said. "Too many crystal pieces in the way." Jack looked thoughtful. "Maybe we don't need them to." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his great-grandfather's mining journal. "The old ways got us into this. Maybe they can get us out." "What are you thinking?" "These crystals respond to vibrations, right?" Jack started pressing buttons on their one working control panel. "So let's make some noise." He reversed the power to their broken drill. Instead of spinning, it started vibrating at a specific frequency. The crystal pieces around their ship began to move. "You're creating a path." Mary understood now. The vibrations were pushing the crystals aside. "Just like my great-grandfather used to do in crystal caves," Jack nodded. "Sound moves things. We just need tow." A new alarm cut him off. The hull was starting to crack. But then they heard something else, a different kind of vibration. Through their view screen, they saw the council ships approaching. Each one was producing the same frequency as their drill. "The aliens are copying us," Mary said with surprise. "They learn fast too," Jack smiled. Working together, the human and alien ships created a safe path through the crystal field. Bill and Rob's ships reached the crystal cracker just as its hull finally gave way. 10 minutes later, Jack and Mary stood in the council chamber, still wearing their damaged spacesuits. The room was completely silent as First Speaker Ray approached them. "You took an incredible risk," he said seriously. Then his face broke into a smile. "And you have saved us all." The chamber erupted in cheers. Aliens who had once feared to be near humans were now rushing to shake their hands. "The Council has studied the control crystal's remains," Ambassador Tom told them. "It was an automated mining system from a civilization that died out millions of years ago. It kept going, making more and more of itself, long after its creators were gone. And now we know how to stop it if it ever happens again," Jack added. He held up his great-grandfather's journal. Sometimes the best solutions are written in the past. First Speaker Ray raised his hands for silence. "The Council has made 2 decisions today. First, we are creating a new department, the Emergency Solutions Team, and we want humans to lead it." "And the second decision?" Mary asked. "We are officially removing Earth's classification as a death world." Ray smiled. "From now on, it will be known as a solution world, a place where difficulties create problem solvers." Jack looked at his team, at Bill and Rob still covered in crystal dust, at Pete with his sensors, at Mike already planning improvements to their ships. Then he looked at the aliens around them, no longer afraid but curious and respectful. "You know," he said, "back on Earth, after a successful mining operation, we have a tradition." "What's that?" First Speaker Ray asked. "We celebrate." Jack grinned. "And I think saving the galaxy counts as a successful operation." The celebration lasted for hours. Aliens and humans shared stories, compared techniques, and planned for future cooperation. The humans taught the aliens old mining songs, and the aliens showed them new ways to use sound and crystal technology. As Jack watched it all, he opened his great-grandfather's journal one more time. On the last page, he wrote, "Sometimes the universe's biggest problems need the simplest solutions, and sometimes the most feared people make the best friends. All you need is the courage to try something different, and maybe a few explosions along the way." In the Council archives, they added a new rule that day. When all else fails, call a Deathworlder. They might have crazy ideas, but sometimes crazy is exactly what you need. The end.